joking.
No. So, okay, so we're online. Uterine menstrual cycle. Guys, this is describing what's happening to the endometrium of the uterus.
It's sloughing off.
Yes, yes. This presumes that the menstrual cycle lasts, thank you, for 28 days. In the beginning of this menstrual period, yes, the endometrium sloughs off. That results in the flow of blood. That happens in the first. How many days is the menstrual cycle last? I know there's textbook answers of 3 days to 5 days. Does that seem about right to what you get? Yeah. Depends. So that's what they said, right? Guys, but after this material is sloughed off, the endometrium of the uterus goes into a growth phase. What's called a proliferative phase. We'll get to this. So menstrual is the first, proliferative is second. And the third phase is called the secretory. During the secretory phase, we'll see a nice picture of it on the next page. On the secretory page, the endometrium becomes more specialized. And we'll see exactly what that means. It's interesting. It's interesting to know that FSH and LH, boy, I thought we had to throw those things out and forget them. It's interesting that actually they have an effect on the uterine cycle. In other words, they have something to do with whether the endometrium gets sloughed off, or at other times when the endometrium grows up to be more thicker, or when it grows up to be more specialized. Let's look at the picture. This is I think good. So those are the three phases we just talked about. The menstrual is the first one. That's when the woman is bleeding. Number 2 phase is the proliferative. The word proliferate. What does the word proliferate mean, by the way?
Profound.
Let's. Okay, so maybe, but not quite. Let's see. Proliferate. To form more. One of the dictums of my religion is, actually the first dictum of the religion is to meet a girl and proliferate, to create a lot of children.
Okay.
Yeah. In this case, proliferate means proliferate the layer of the endometrium so that endometrium becomes thicker. The next phase is...
Why is it a stage and not a phase? Because the first one, it's a phase, then the next 2 are stages.
Oh.
What's the difference?
Is it the same?
Maybe because it's a phase.
That's a great question. As far as I understand, I think that means the same thing to me, either a stage or a phase. But that's a good question though. Let me maybe write that down and think about it. Actually, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to look it up somewhere. Stage and phase.
Okay. Like the time.
It's a time, yes. Let's get to the picture. So here are the. I know there's kind of a lot of information. I want us to get to a picture that shows us all this stuff. Maybe this is the best one. Guys, if you're a visual person like me, and you're looking at days, all 28 days, beginning from day number 1, going to day number 28, you should know that days 1 through 5 are the menstrual phase. That's the part where the woman is bleeding. Guys, I know this isn't set in stone, right? Because some people bleed for 3 days, others bleed for 5 days, others, etc., etc.
So it begins with the bleeding?
It begins with the bleeding, yes. Yes. So
you're right, they're the same thing. Stage and phase are the same thing.
Are the same thing. Yeah. So so that's the first phase. first stage, right? So the menstrual stage is the first one. And I just want you to kind of keep in mind, what's happening to the uterus? It's being sloughed off. After everything is sloughed off, what's the next phase? Next phase is proliferative phase. Proliferative phase, this is the stage where the endometrium adds more layers on top of another layer on top of another layer. Yeah, because remember, the endometrium, just like other surfaces of the body, or should I say other mucosas? Remember mucosas are membranes of the body, they're open to the outside?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the endometrium is an example of that kind of thing, because eventually it's open to the outside. Anyway, during the proliferative phase, the endometrium grows to be more layers, more thick. Finally, after the proliferative, there's something called the secretory phase. Secretory phase. During the secretory phase, the endometrium becomes more vascular. More vascular means that there are more blood vessels that enter into endometrium. There are more glands. Glands are structures that produce stuff. So when I said before that a developing embryo or fetus might need, for example, sugar, these glands will produce sugar in the form of glycogen, produce maybe some proteins, produce other things that this developing human being would need. That happens during the secretory phase. Let me find another picture that actually shows a little bit better. Menstrual phase. Remember, menstrual phase, the endometrium is sloughed off. Proliferative, it grows. Secretory, it grows a little bit more, but it becomes more vascular, more capable of secreting nutrients. Guys, if somebody asks this question, maybe on the test, maybe later after this class, during which stage of the menstrual cycle is the endometrium the thinnest? Would it occur during menstrual, A, menstrual, B, proliferative,
Menstrual.
C, secretory?
Menstrual.
Menstrual, right. That's when it's the thinnest. Okay, so this is kind of a snapshot, a quick shot of what's happening. Excuse me, what's happening to this. Now, let me just say a little bit more. I don't want to guys hold you too much here. Let me say a little bit more about this. Let's come back to a second to FSH, LH. FSH and LH. And especially to such things as estrogen and progesterone. We haven't talked about this specifically, but let me just tell you that estrogen is a hormone, right? Estrogen as a hormone is produced during, estrogen as a hormone is produced by the follicle, like the follicle that had the egg inside. That was before the egg was released, right? But anyway, the follicle produces estrogen. What does estrogen do? Estrogen does this. Estrogen is responsible for proliferative phase. So remember, at the end of this phase, the endometrium is very thin. And I said during proliferative phase, the endometrium needs to build up, have more layers. Who causes the endometrium to build up in layers? The hormone
LH?
LH, LH is a little bit, LH is involved, but I'm thinking if we have to decide between estrogen and progesterone, who actually makes the breasts grow larger?
I would say estrogen.
Estrogen, right?
Estrogen.
Because it's the same thing that makes the endometrium also to grow thicker.
Oh.
But wouldn't progesterone do that also, being that like when a woman is pregnant, her breasts do get larger? I mean, I don't know if it's just the milk, but I've noticed.
Like,
You understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. Yes, yes. Good point. Right. So, but for right now, I just want us to kind of focus on the fact that estrogen, I know it's a hormone and I know it's the female hormone. Estrogen is an incredibly powerful growth promoting thing. Incredibly powerful growth promoting hormone. So that's estrogen. Okay, so estrogen makes things grow, 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 grow. By the way, if somebody has too much estrogen and they cause the cells either of endometrium or of the breast, well, what happens if the cells of the breast grow too much? Or the endometrium, they grow constantly too much. What's the pathological thing that can happen if cells grow too fast, too much?
isn't there like a tumor?
Yeah, a cancer. Yeah. Guys, too much estrogen is a bad thing. Because estrogen signal to everything that it touches, the breast I'm using as an example, also the endometrium, is to grow, 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 grow. It's lucky that our body remembers there is such a thing as homeostasis.
Oh,
And
yeah.
after estrogen builds up all the endometrium in the proliferative phase, the body quickly switches off to another kind of hormone. Another kind of hormone that causes the endometrium not so much to grow, but to become more specialized in making glycogen, in making proteins, in feeding this embryo. If there's an embryo, then it'll feed the embryo. If there is no embryo, then there will be kind of extra production of these nutritional things. Does that make sense that proliferation caused by estrogen, secretion, which means the development, the production of either glycogen or glucose or things like this, is done with the help of progesterone. And remember, I also mentioned the fact that progesterone, it literally means for pregnancy. Yeah. The body realizes, right, now the body undergoes through these cycles. I think the body expects that the woman will be pregnant every single time. That's why the body goes through the phase of building up this endometrium. Then, in the hope that there will be pregnancy, it undergoes a stage of the secretory phase to feed this new embryo. And, to feed this new embryo. Does that make sense, these three phases? 1, 2, 3. By the way, what happens after we've finished the 28-day cycle? We've gone through menstrual, proliferative, secretory. What's the next phase after this?
Begins again.
It begins again. Ooh, so you're saying that after this, we're back to
The menstrual flow.
menstrual flow. What is the thickness of the endometrium when there's menstrual flow?
It's not very thick.
It's not very thick. So you mean we go from this much thickness to this much thickness?
Right, because it's sloughing it off.
Yeah, because a lot of this was sloughed off.
What makes it slothful? Like,
And that's the last question that I wanted to address. What makes it so? What makes it so? So let's see. So we said that in order to build up the endometrium, we need, what hormone builds up the endometrium?
estrogen.
Estrogen. And what hormone causes the endometrium to become specialized for the point of having implanted, for the point of feeding a fetus or an embryo?
Progesterone.
Progesterone, right. Guys, always remember that, estrogen is one side, progesterone, and the word progesterone should make you think of pregnancy. Of the endometrium supplying the new embryo or the fetus with nutrition. Okay, but the question is good. But what happens, why all of a sudden during the menstrual phase, why all of a sudden does all this endometrium get sloughed off? Let's right? how come we're going from this high level in